Hey everybody, today we're going to talk some more about probability. Let's take a look at our I can statement for today so we know what our goals are going to be. It says, I can list all possible outcomes for a given event. That's one of our goals. And what does that mean? We need to list all of the possible things that could happen if we were to do an event like spin a spinner or flip a coin, or in particular today, roll a die. So we have to list all of the possibilities that could happen for a given event. And another one of our I can statements for today is I can use the words impossible, unlikely, equally likely, likely, and certain to describe the likelihood of an outcome. We've been doing this for quite a few days, but let's go ahead and review our vocabulary words before we get started. Impossible means that there is no chance that an event will happen. The event will not happen. So just like in our die here, there is no number 7 on the die, so it is impossible to roll a 7 on the die. Another vocabulary word that we have been using is unlikely. And unlikely meaning that the event will probably not happen and there's just a little chance. So if you take a look at this rectangle again, it is unlikely to choose a triangle from the box because there's less triangles than any other shape in that box. We've also been using equally likely, which means it has the same chance of occurring. And like in a coin, we see that there is 1 heads and 1 tails, so it is equally likely to land on heads and tails. Another vocabulary word we've been using is likely, and that means that the event will probably happen or there's a good chance of it happening. And in the spinner, it is likely to land on the letter A here because there's more A's than any other letter on the spinner. And certain, which means it will definitely happen. There's a 100% chance that it's going to happen. And I know in my rectangle right here that it is certain to choose a circle from the box because there are all circles. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, we're going to be working on probability with a coin. I want you to look at a coin. It can be a penny, a nickel, a dime, or a quarter. How many possible outcomes are there on a coin? How do you know? So possible outcomes is, if you were to flip that coin, what could you land on? When you're ready to talk about it, go ahead and unpause the video, but I would like you to pause the video for now to think about these answers to the questions. All right, now that you've unpaused the video, let's take a look at a coin. We're going to take a look at this penny. If you notice that this penny has 2 sides, 1 heads and 1 tails. So there's 2 sides to a coin, heads and tails, which means that there are 2 possible outcomes on any coin. Okay, now let's look at this penny again. If you were to toss up the coin in the air, what's the likelihood of the coin landing on heads? And what's the likelihood of the coin landing on tails? I want to know how you know, so go ahead and pause the video, think about the questions, and then unpause it when you're ready to answer. Well, let's take a look. So now we know that the likelihood of tossing the coin in the air and landing on heads is equally likely because there's 1 heads on the coin and 1 tails on the coin. There's 1 of each side. And tails is equally likely. So if we were to toss a coin in the air 10 times, how many times do you think it will land on heads? How do you know? Think about that for a moment. Pause your video, and when you are ready to check your answer, go ahead and unpause it. Okay, now that you've unpaused it, well, I know if I have an equal chance of picking heads or tails when I toss up a coin and I toss it up 10 times, it's likely that I will have 5 heads and 5 tails just because there's the same amount of each side. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look and see if we can do that on a coin. As you see, I have a website up with a coin toss. I'm going to put the number of tosses that it's going to toss the coin in the air virtually to 10. I'm going to click on Toss 'em. And I'm going to take a look. Oh, 3 heads, 7 tails, and 10 number of tosses. Were we correct? Even though we guessed 5 and 5, it's not exactly going to happen like that all the time. So let's take a look. Do you think we'll get the same results every time we do the experiment? Why or why not? Think about that. Pause the video when you're ready, unpause it. Well, now that you've unpaused it, let's check again. We got heads first time and tails the second time. We're going to clear our results and see if we get the same results. 6 and 4. Closer to our 5 and 5, but not exact. Why don't you think that we get the same number every single time? Because it's probability and we're just making a good prediction. So let's take a look at our next activity. Now we're going to take a look at a die. If you have a die at home, go ahead and take a look at it and see how many sides does a die have and how many different outcomes are there. And what are those outcomes? Pause the video and then unpause it when you're ready. Now that you've unpaused it, let's talk about the sides of a die. If you look at a die, there's 6 sides. This is what the 6 sides look like. A 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So the possible outcomes are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. There are 6 possible outcomes on a die. What would the likelihood of rolling a 6 on this die be? Remember our vocabulary words. What vocabulary word would you use for the probability of rolling a 6 on this die? Pause your video, unpause it when you're ready. Well, now that you've unpaused it, let's take a look. It is unlikely that we would roll a 6 on this die. Why? Because there's only 1 6 out of all the 6 sides. So you only have a 1 out of 6 chance of getting a 6. That's not very likely, is it? It's very unlikely. Let's take a look at another question about a die. What's the likelihood of rolling a 3? Pause your video. When you're ready, unpause it. Now that you've unpaused it, let's take a look. Unlikely again. Why? Because there's only 1 3 out of all 6 sides. You have a 1 out of 6 chance, just like rolling a 6. Now let's think about another type of question for die. Let's take a look at this question. What's the likelihood of rolling an even number? Pause your video. When you're ready, unpause it. Now that you've unpaused it, let's take a look at this die. I got to see how many even numbers I have. Well, I know that 2, 4, and 6 are even numbers. So I have 3 even numbers and 3 not even numbers, or we call those odds. So I actually have an equally likely chance of rolling an even number, since there are 3 even numbers on the die and 3 odd numbers. So let's take a look at what we've done today and see if we've reached our goal. Our goals were to list all the possible outcomes for a given event. Did we list all of the possible outcomes that we can get if we toss a coin in the air or roll a die? And Did we use the words impossible, unlikely, equally likely, likely, and certain to describe the likelihood of an outcome? If you said yes, I would agree. Great job.